Hey everyone, it's your girl Nachi, and I'm here with.
Damaris, your favorite critical thinking enthusiast.
Of course, of course. Well, I'm really excited about this conversation we're about to have because I feel we have all been in a situation where we have felt like a fraud and have talked
Right.
ourselves out of doing something just because we don't believe we have the chops to do it. And this is just a conversation we need to have because it's important for people to know that you are capable, you are able.
Yep.
Nothing should stop you. You should
Nope.
always move forward. And I'm glad we're gonna get into this topic because it's really needed.
Yeah. Imposter imposter syndrome. And to your point, I know I felt it in my life, and almost everyone that I ever speak to at some point has mentioned that they felt somewhat of an imposter. Even when I think about some of the guests that we've had that I feel are subject matter experts, they have their own oh, feelings of anxiety and
Right.
uh, inadequacy of, am I the right person to be talking about this? And it just, I think to your point, this is so perfect for us to be talking about this because it is something that many of us experience. And I can honestly, at least for myself, speak to it from a woman's point of view. Although I do know that men do go through some level of imposter syndrome, but I know for women, sometimes it feels like it could be a little bit more acute in what we go through and
Right.
how we deal with that. So I feel like we should start with a definition of what imposter syndrome is so that we can start from the same space. So, a definition I found on betterup.com's website was imposter syndrome is the condition of feeling anxious and not experiencing success internally, despite being high performing in external and objective ways. This condition often results in people feeling like a fraud or a
Mhm.
phony and
Right.
doubting their abilities. And I felt that was like a perfect definition of really, broadly defining what I view imposter syndrome to be.
Yeah, it's doubting your own skills, your talent, any accomplishments that you've done, and just internalizing that fear like you mentioned. It's that all of that is what we've experienced as imposter syndrome. And I can probably count a number of times that that's crept up in in my life and journey, um, particularly in career and business and just, a whole lot. Even with this podcast, we can talk about
Girl,
that.
you
Yes.
already know that this is on my list of, as we discuss this, about what it is that
Hmm.
that I uh, how and when I felt like an imposter.
Hmm.
Let's talk through some of the signs of what
Yeah.
and the types of imposter syndrome. And I know for me the idea of being feeling inadequate, feeling like you're not qualified for what it is that especially when it comes to work and career and jobs, is not feeling you're 100% qualified for this role.
Hmm.
And one of the things that was interesting for me was I I consulted for a company that was looking to diversify their candidate pool for their hiring practices, right? Because what they realized, and kudos to them, was that they were only hiring a certain type of person, and that is because that person usually reflected what they looked like because that's who they knew and that was who was in their network. So they're like, oh, if we're really looking to succeed in business, we probably need to diversify our workplace, right? And that includes diversification of background, experience, race, all of that, but that is to contribute to a qualified candidate, right? So it was, before you get the DEI, opponents, this wasn't about, oh, let's just hire someone for the sake of their color. It was, how do we broaden our hiring pool?
Right,
And
right.
the fact that they recognized that they were not doing a good job was in itself a good thing. But what I learned in consulting for them on how to broaden their candidate pool to new candidates was that, especially when it came to women, they were less likely than men, and by far less likely than men, to apply for a job if they didn't feel they had 100% or didn't meet 100% of the qualifications. And I felt that 100%. When I read that, I
Yeah.
was just like, facts. Because
Mhm.
that's how I went about when I would apply to jobs. If I couldn't say that I can do all these things, I wouldn't apply.
Mhm.
So women who are very much qualified for a lot of these roles won't even apply because they don't think they will qualify. They're adequately qualified to go for these roles. And that was a perfect sign of imposter syndrome. And I didn't even realize that about myself. And as I was going through this research, I- it resonated, and I agreed wholeheartedly with. I didn't doubt that stat. I didn't doubt that data point.
Yeah, when I was looking up the different types or the signs of imposter syndrome, um being an expert is was a type that came up, and similar to you, it was if I didn't fit all of the qualifications for a particular job post, I wouldn't go for it. And again, I think mostly women deal with that where they feel like they have to qualify, like they have to hit all those check marks to make sure that
Yeah,
they meet the requirement. Well, it's not even a requirement. They just put out these are the
right,
qualifications that we're looking for. So if it's not listed as a requirement,
right.
that means you can go for it. But we're so conditioned to believing that we
Mhm.
have to meet every single one of those qualifications. And I can't tell you how many times I've looked at something and I would say to myself, yeah, I don't do this one thing, but I fit every
Right.
other checkbox.
Mind you,
But I
and
didn't,
up to 20% of fewer women apply to jobs than men
and that's
because of that.
crazy. Yeah, yeah. So so that's just something that we have to be aware of and think through as we see certain situations or opportunities where we feel like, oh, I don't have that certification or that degree or you don't necessarily have I through my job a lot of people go for certain certifications and I have my master's degree and that was it. Like I feel that should be enough.
Right.
I don't, I don't need to get anything else. I don't see the need unless I see a true need for it. I'm not
Yeah.
going for it. And so a lot of my colleagues have gone for certain certifications because it's something that people in our industry have gone for and it's like yes,
And it makes you quote more
right.
qualified,
And
right?
I'm like, really?
How
I
about my
don't think so.
experience?
Right. I've been
My
in this
brain.
game. Right. I say I've been in this game for far too long. I don't think I need that. I'm okay. Unless you're telling me
You may
that
need it.
me right. Unless you're telling me getting this certification is going to increase my pay
Mhm.
significantly, then we may talk. I don't know.
Right.
But again, you don't need to feel like you have to check all those boxes to be considered an expert. That's
Right.
just, that's my opinion and I know it's hard for some people to let that go, but really that attributes to a lot of women believing that they're just not qualified for something to do
Yeah.
anything. So yeah.
Yeah. And I definitely would say that for me, when I worked in corporate, I was more of the perfectionist. And so
Mhm.
while it allowed me to thrive in a lot of my roles, it did hinder me because I was so focused on the details and get buried in those things, and needing everything to be perfect in order for something to be delivered. And if it wasn't, then I felt like I wasn't doing my job at its best.
Yeah, I'm not the
And
perfectionist.
yeah, what's that?
I said I'm not the perfectionist.
Yeah, well, I
But
am,
I
but
know,
I
but I
also
get what you're
realize it's
saying.
because, yeah, but it comes from also a place of the need to be in control. And that is because what I delivered at work, if I didn't have control over it, I didn't want someone else to have to control over my narrative too.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, I'll do it, and I know I'm going to do it great. But
Right.
you can't also do that. Part of more leadership positions, it requires you to let go of some of that stuff, to let go of some of that control. You have to. You can't be successful in moving up if that's not how you are. But and I did get better with that over time, but that was definitely something with me about that. And that's a type of imposter syndrome type, apparently. So I learned.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. I don't think I think I may borderline perfectionist, but I'm not a true perfectionist. I would get to a point where I would say, I think this is good enough, you know. Um,
That's good.
but at the same time, I also like to do everything myself because I can only do it
So that
right.
you are a perfectionist. She
But
doesn't even realize that. That is a
I'm
requirement.
not.
You need to
No.
be in control. Okay. Riddle
Yes,
me
but
that, sister. I'm listening. I'm listening.
it's not I it's not that I don't believe someone else can do the job. I'm more of I'm a soloist, right? So that's like another type
Mm,
of
hmm.
um of imposter syndrome. I'm the type that I would do the work. I don't want to ask. If I have to ask you or ask
Okay.
help to do something,
Okay.
then I feel like I'm not, I'm not able to do it. I need to be able to complete this task or this
Hmm.
project or whatever the situation or thing that I'm doing without having to ask for help. And that is a problem. That is a
Yes.
problem
Yes.
because you can't go far doing things by
Hmm.
yourself, right? And so I don't think I'm a perfectionist because I do
That's
feel I
fair.
can get to a
Hmm.
certain point where it's like, okay, this is good enough. I don't have to dot every I and cross every
Right.
T
Right.
for it to be good enough. I'm okay,
Yeah.
I could get to good enough, right? But asking for help to get something done, I don't
Gotcha.
do that because I feel like me asking for help means I'm not qualified to do the
Right.
task or the
Right.
project, right? So that's where I'm coming from. Where
That's fair.
yeah, yeah,
That's fair. I think for me, it always just stemmed from feeling inadequate, right? Like, so it's interesting as we were preparing to do this episode, I didn't realize there were so many different types of imposter syndrome, right? I thought it was
right.
just,
You
you just
just
don't
don't
feel like
feel
you're,
yes.
yeah, you just don't feel adequate.
Right.
But there were different types of inadequacies apparently. And
Mhm.
so that was really interesting to come across. And you mentioned earlier already about this podcast. And I absolutely felt that way when even thinking about doing this, proposing this to you. And as we were doing it, just like, okay, who's going to listen to us? Why
Right.
us?
Right.
Why would
Right.
anyone care what we have to say? But something in me just kept going like, why not?
Right. Right.
You're not going to know unless you try it.
Exactly.
You have to
Exactly.
do it.
Yeah.
And so this is me breaking away from that feeling of being an imposter, of feeling like, who am I to think that I'm qualified to have my own show to discuss these topics? But when we talked about doing this show, I felt confident simply because we're talking about things that we actually have gone through. So no one can tell me how I should feel or what I went through. So I don't really give a fuck about,
Mhm.
what you if you think I'm qualified or not to have my own show. And then also over the last few years, I started to not care about what people think about me. And that's one of the things that I feel definitely fed into my imposter syndrome in my career, because I felt like I had to be concerned about how others viewed me, how they viewed my work, the everything that I presented when I went into the office. Is all under a microscope. And so to me, I just felt like I'm always having to deliver to keep letting them know I am qualified. I'm actually overqualified for this,
Right,
and
right.
I could do this in my sleep, and I run circles around all of you guys.
Right.
So, so it's one of those things where it was that that feeling that of being an imposter, being in that of caring about what others thought about me. And that is what kind of fed into that. But since I moved away from that over the last like 5, 6 years, and that started from leaving the corporate world and doing my own consultancy, and then ultimately just focusing on my own thing without worrying about what other people thought. That was a journey in itself, and it's still a journey. Every day I have to,
Right.
just remind myself, like, who cares what
Right.
they
Right.
think?
You
I got
know
to
what
do
you're
with what
doing.
feels right to me.
Right.
And
Right.
so,
But I
so
think,
starting the podcast is one of those, specific examples.
yeah. Well, I think the whole idea of not feeling you're qualified, you're not the expert, right? So
Hmm.
that's the one type that you've overcome. But I also feel that you struggle sometimes with the perfectionist piece of it too. And what I
Wow, wow, wow. It comes out. Go ahead, sister. Tell me about
oh,
myself.
no, I
Tell me
just want
about
to
myself.
point out. I want to
Mm,
point out.
yes. And actually, I think I've gotten better with that because there were a lot of things I was okay with it not being perfect.
Damaris, I
I know
know.
you come from a place of love. So let me
What
look
I'm
at this mirror.
saying.
Hold up the mirror, Nachi.
You see, you always like to come in.
No, I'm saying hold up the mirror for me so I can see myself. Not
Oh,
to you.
not for me to see
I don't
myself.
know. It's
Okay.
like, hold up the mirror. Tell me about myself. Go ahead.
Okay. No, I wanted to
Okay.
point.
She's like, no problem. It's about you. Great. Let me keep telling you about you.
No, but I want for people to understand the different types and how it plays, right?
Right.
You've overcome this. I'm not the, I am good enough. I'm qualified rather enough to do a podcast, right?
Right.
And so then the other piece is making sure that everything is right and we do it a certain way. And I know, and I feel like we balance each other out, right? Because I'm in the same boat, but I feel like we both balance each other out because when one is feeling some kind of way, the other
Right.
one is the cheerleader. And I feel like this has been we're a great compliment to having this podcast because there's been times where you would come to me and say, I don't know, what do you think about this? How
Right.
I don't like the way, and I'm like, girl, this look good to me.
Right.
Because perfectionism is
Right.
not one that I struggle with. This looks
Right.
good enough.
You're like, girl, bye.
Right.
You definitely told me that several times. I'm like, but we didn't do this. And it was like that whole
No.
crossing T's,
Yeah,
dotting
yeah,
I's. You're
like,
right,
no,
Archie, you're right.
we don't need to do that. We don't need to do that. We are here right now
Mm,
and we're
mm.
good where we are. We'll get to,
So basically, she's telling y'all, don't at me. We're going to ignore it. Ah, boy.
but this is a great
Yeah.
example. The podcast, coming up with the podcast is a great example of overcoming these fears, right?
Yep.
And overcoming these different types of imposter syndrome because it's going to hit you in all directions. You just have to be able to be aware of it and know how to pivot and do some self-talking and put
Right.
things in place for yourself so that you don't succumb to the negative self-talk and talk yourself out of something that could be great.
Right. You're absolutely right. What is some other, when have you come across that in your life where you feel like, okay, I definitely suffered from this at this point?
Oh, well, I always like to get into a whole lot of different things.
Yeah. Oh, yes, the Gemini in you. You
Yeah,
love a new
yeah.
project.
Yeah, I do. I do. But that's just me. I love to get into I have an interest in a lot of different things. So I'm just not, you know, I'm just I'm not one path. I'm multiple paths.
Right.
So I remember when I started getting into herbalism and um for me, I felt like I have to have this certification and I need to go to school and have
Mm,
just to have that found I felt like that foundation so that I could have the credibility to share with people, yes, I know
right.
about this, right? I know about how to work with herb. I went to this place to get a Reiki um go through a Reiki session. And I was talking to the young woman that was doing the Reiki energy healing, and she was asking me. I was telling her about my dream of becoming an herbalist and what I wanted to do, and she's like, okay, well, what have you done? And I'm telling her, yeah, I've worked with herbs before. I've done, I've had my own soap business, and I made oils and lotions, and and I loved using herbs to infuse a lot of the products I would make. And she told me, she said, a lot of us feel like we need some certification to tell us we're we're an herbalist, right? She's
Mm,
like, I'm an herbalist. I didn't go to any school, but I work with herbs and I use it for healing purposes.
right.
I'm an herbalist and that's it. I don't need to go to some special school
Hmm.
or certification program. And not to say that you don't, you shouldn't be learning these things. I'm not saying
Right.
that. One, and her point was, don't feel like you have to do all of this stuff to start feeling in that place of being, knowing that you are an herbalist.
Right.
And I was like, you are absolutely right. But
Hmm.
I still have I need to take some
No,
courses. I need to, but her message rung strong. Like I hear it all the time. She's
right.
always in my head, when I'm feeling that I haven't done enough, or I haven't,
Hmm.
um I don't know. I'm because I start comparing myself to other people who are way
Yeah.
more advanced than I am, right? Because that's what we end up doing. We start
Yep.
comparing ourselves to others. Like, oh my gosh, this person, they know so much and they work with like 300 different herbs. And like,
Right.
I don't know if I could ever be, like I could ever get
Yeah.
to that place. And I don't need to compare myself. Like I have my own
No.
path, my own journey, and I could do my own thing. And I don't have to, be a clinical herbalist. You know what I'm saying? It's just like I don't have to be the one to know 400 different types of herbs,
Right. Right.
right?
There's
I just
Google for that. I mean, real talk, like, you don't. And I think it's always because part of growing up and being indoctrinated in the school system, and this idea that you are going to school so you can get ready to be another worker in the workforce, right?
yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
but you need that validation in order to get into this workforce and earn X amount of dollars and do all this stuff. So we're always seeking some third party validation.
Mhm.
And that's what that
Mhm.
certification was for you, right? It was validation you know, for what it is that you're an expert in. So now you
Right.
have a piece of paper saying, yes, you are an expert in this.
But that's for me
And
to feel good about it,
right,
right? It's
right,
it's not, that piece of paper. at the end of the day, when you graduate, it's whether or not you can do the job. You
Right.
know?
Yeah. I'll say the other thing, in addition to the podcast, but something that always kind of gets me every once in a while is anytime I have to speak in public or do some sort of
Mm,
presentation, I hate it.
yes. Yeah.
I hate it.
Yeah.
So this podcast has really forced me outside of my comfort zone. While I'm
Mhm.
not presenting to a group of people live, I am talking
Right.
and I
Right.
know I'm being listened to
Right.
on different platforms. And so that is something I've had to get used to and be okay with. And the funniest thing is that is because although I know I'm intelligent, I think I sound dumb.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
It is cognitive dissonance. Like
Mhm.
I know I'm not, but
Right,
I'm like,
right.
I don't sound like I know what I'm talking about. I don't sound
What a
I
yeah.
I don't sound like I know what I'm talking about, and that's
Right.
crazy. That is
But
crazy
then
talk.
yeah, and critiquing every little thing.
Oh, yeah.
You are your hardest critic.
I have a lot of editing to do for this episode already. I can tell. Oh, I'm gonna be taking that out.
But you know me, yeah, I have 100 edits for you on
Yeah,
top of
no,
your
I know.
edits.
No, I know. So
Yeah.
it's it's really funny how you get into your own head, into your own psyche, and you psych yourself out for things
Mhm.
you don't even give yourself the chance to do it. Or
Mm.
even if you don't succeed, that chance of failing is what you need in order to learn and level up. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I've learned over the years is that I've been told that I have a fear of failing, and that is what's
Mhm.
also limiting me because
Right.
I I'm scared to fail, and by being scared to fail, I'll never really be able to level up until I do these things.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
1,000%, it's the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny you talk about public speaking because uh recently I've had someone come up to me, a friend of mine, who is doing an event, and she had invited me to be part of her panel. And I told you, I was just like, I don't know if I want to do this panel, because public speaking is just not my thing. I don't like it. Not that I haven't done it before. I've done it before. I hate it. I hate
Yeah.
it. Right. And so going back to we are each other's cheerleader. And you were like, you can do this. You are qualified.
Right.
And I was
You
like,
is special.
and you basically told me that, hey, do it. What it doesn't hurt you by doing it. So take that step. And it's true. It's just that fear feeling of fear of sounding like you don't know what you're talking
Yeah,
about, right?
for sure.
And
Because
so
I'm gonna
and
fuck up a word, I'm gonna stutter, I'm gonna make mistakes, and so then that means if I'm not perfect, oh my God, I must be dumb. This crazy shit I
Y-
say in my head. It's
yeah,
stupid.
yeah. No,
But
no,
then I
no.
catch myself, and so then I'm just
Yeah.
like reeling it back, like, girl, bye, you are amazing. You are so smart. You run
Okay.
circles around these
Okay.
people.
Yes. Okay.
Even if I have to say that to myself in the mirror and nobody else is around, that's okay.
But sometimes you have to do that, to
Yes.
psych yourself up because you will talk
You gotta
yourself out
rally.
of, yes, you would talk yourself out of an
Easily,
opportunity. And how are you going to
easily,
grow,
easily.
right? Just like you said, it's like if you want to succeed and you want to grow, you have to be open to fail because
Mhm.
failing leads
Yeah.
to learning and becoming better. And
Yep. Yep.
we have to be okay with failing. And I know that's hard. Trust me, I know it's hard. I don't like the idea of failing.
No,
And
and that's something that's been rooted into us at a young age, and when I think about the societal and cultural factors that contribute to imposter syndrome, part of that is, okay, from a society perspective, it's kind of been what we've seen where for women in particular, we're raised to believe that we're just not always gonna we can't get into certain industries because we're not experts in certain subject matters, and we're just not going to be good at math or science. And
Right.
so that's just something that's kind of been ingrained from a society perspective, which has been, definitely changed a lot since when we were in grammar school. The all these programs, these STEM programs, and really the push to try to get more women in a lot of sectors that are dominated by men. So I love seeing that. But that, this imposter syndrome also comes from, society to some extent. And I think culturally for us, where I think limits are placed on us from the day we were born, right?
Right. Mhm.
And we're for us, it's go to school so you could get a good job. You get a good job um, so you can have your family, be a good daughter always, be a good wife, a good mother, and
Mhm.
and be that that good person in society and go to church. And so, where's the room to explore?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Oh, how do you satiate your curiosity when there's not a lot of room for that? Then you kind of feel you don't have the right to explore. So when opportunities present themselves, you don't think you're qualified. You don't think you should do it because you're like, who am I to want to do that?
Right. Right.
Right. And I had to think about that one today. Like, yeah, I think you and I lucked out to a degree because we had a father that was pretty audacious in how he moved about in this world, and he didn't let anybody else's limitations stop him. And sometimes he would have to remind me of that about myself. He's like, oh, yeah, mommy, you could do this. And it's just like, yeah, yeah, because it's very easy to be like, who am I to think I could do that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm busy trying to be a good daughter, a good Catholic, a good this and that. Girl,
Well, it's funny because I as an older child, I feel there's a lot more pressure for the older
hmm
sibling because there's always this expectation, right, of doing things, and it's almost like parents forget that the older child is also a child.
I'm
Right?
sorry for you.
It's like, I think about, when we would be playing and some shit happens and I'm the one who gets in trouble. Like, what the
That you should
fuck?
have been watching us.
But I'm not 10 years older than you.
You should have been watching us.
I'm a child too. I want to play.
No, they're wrong for that.
Right. So it starts from that point, right? Like when you're a child and then you're put in these positions of you older, you should know better. What?
Right,
How?
right,
Please tell me
right.
how. And I'm not gonna lie. I have done that sometimes with my
Oh,
kids. And I'll just be like, oh, I'm sorry, mommy. But you should know better.
right, right.
But no, but seriously, it's like you're putting a lot of pressure on a
Mhm.
child. Like if it's, if you have a number of siblings and cousins and y'all, and the oldest one is always going to get it. Even if they want to be part of it, they have to also have this mentality of,
Right.
well, is this the right thing to do? Or nah, let's
Mhm,
not do that because we're gonna get in trouble. And
mhm.
I think it starts from that point too. Just speaking from an older sibling, younger siblings,
Wow.
they run amok. They do
Well, I
whatever.
love that journey for you.
But yeah, it's I and I think you just have to for me I recognize that. I
Yeah,
recognize
that's
that
important.
that's where
Some of that comes
some of
out from
my challenges are surrounded from it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And be okay with failing, because I think they struggle with that as
That's
well.
huge. Yeah, and that yes, and that contributes a lot to imposter syndrome. This idea
Yeah.
of if you fail, then you're not qualified, you're not good enough for it. And
Right.
I think for me, when you talked about those childhood experiences, for me, it was I realize why I'm a perfectionist now, and and it comes from needing to be as perfect as possible growing up to be the best daughter, to be the best.
Mhm.
And when I'm saying being the best daughter, I'm just saying being a good child to my parents because I know how much they sacrifice for us
Right.
and
Right.
how much they do for us, and they're paying to send us to private school. So I should be doing my best, giving them the best grades and excelling academically, which I did because I just did. Um, like I said, I did my part in that household. I
Right.
contributed,
Right, right.
but with that
What they
came
asked, yeah.
right. And but with that came what I struggled with in adulthood is this perfectionism, and it
Mhm.
bled into work, obviously, which is a big, which was a big part of my life, and so a- and that became a problem for when it's time to let go of certain things, or it's okay to deliver a certain way that doesn't reflect on me as an individual or as um, individual contributor to an organization. So it's interesting to kind of see how they're connected, what we went
Mhm.
through.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm interested to hear what you think about social media and comparison culture. And I'd say for me, I never felt like that I compare myself to others. Like I was never, and, I, and I've never been the type to be like, oh, I wish I had what this person has, or um, let me try to get like what they have or do this. But the form of comparison that apparently I was doing, and I didn't know this until I met with Be That, and it was one of our sessions, and she said to me, she said, "You compare yourself a lot." I was like, "No, I don't." I was like, "I compare myself to no one." And she's like, "No, what you do is you may like how someone is doing something, and then you think to yourself, oh, maybe I should do it that way. And you're not
Mhm.
meant to do it that way. You're meant to
Right.
do it your own way. And
Yeah.
so that's like having a lack of trust in the way, the approach I would normally take. But because I've seen that this person has already done it successfully, I'm like, well, maybe that's what I should apply because again, who doesn't want to fail? Me,
Mhm.
me,
Mhm.
me.
Mhm.
So it was a combination of things she told me. She's like, you need to fail, stop being afraid of failing, and
Right.
you need to stop comparing. And that was a slap in the face because I'm like, this bitch don't compare herself to nobody. So, oh, when she said that, I was like,
It
oh, okay,
makes
I guess
sense.
so. I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like, I guess so. And
Mhm.
so from that, since then, I've recognized that, okay, I have to do things my way and that is okay. I'm meant to do it my way. And
Mhm.
people can work with me or not, but the right people are going to align with me if I do it the way I'm supposed to do it, the way I'm intuitively meant to do it. And so I always look at myself. I don't even say, oh, I'm staying in my lane because I don't even see myself in the same pool. I'm in my own
Right.
pool. I'm
Right.
swimming
Yeah, yeah.
diagonally.
Yes.
I'm swimming horizontally. I'm
Okay.
diving in.
Everywhere.
I'm doing whatever the fuck I want. So
Yeah.
there's no
Yeah.
longer if I even remove myself out of the pool of where I'm in a lane. No, we're not in the same I'm not
Mhm.
in the same pool as you. And that's okay. I'm not saying my pool is better. I'm just saying it's my pool.
Right.
And
It's different. It's
I'm
not
going to rock
yours.
out
Yeah.
how right. And so I think in this world of social media, it is very easy for a lot of people to get caught up in the facade of a lot of people's lives. And some of
Yeah.
it's real, some of it's not. But it's again, it's not meant for you to feel like this is what you should aspire to. You should be aspiring to whatever the creator's calling you to do.
Right, right. And and I think it's okay to look at others for inspiration, right?
Yes. But you need to
Um
understand that fine line.
Right, exactly. When you start thinking, "Oh, I'll never get to that point," or, "This person is around the same age as I am, and they seem so more advanced than or that person is younger than I am, and they're so more." And to your point, you're not even in their swimming pool, like, you
Right.
you
And what works for them
don't.
is not gonna work for
Right,
you.
right, and you don't even know what they've done to get to where they are right now. So,
That
for
part.
you to compare yourself to someone that you see on social media, you have no knowledge, no background as to how they got to where they are at that moment.
Yep.
You Because you found them in the last couple of months, you're like, "Oh, they have everything that I want." And then that stops you from moving forward because you feel like you don't have enough time, or you feel like it's,
Right.
it's too
It seems
late.
daunting,
Yes.
overwhelming.
And but it's not. And it's just like, I see things, if God put it in your heart and in your head, that means it's meant for you to do.
Right.
You just have to figure it out how you're going to do that. And
And not figure
like
it
I
out too much, is more so like just show the intention in the first step
and
and
take a
shit will come
step.
into place. Yeah.
Yes. I always say, you I'm always on the hoping for the best, praying God would open opportunities,
Mhm.
but also taking that one step. You don't have to
Mhm.
figure it all out. It's just
Right.
taking that one step. You want to open a
'Cause
business?
I get caught up
Okay.
in the trap of the how. I'm like, "How, God? How?
Yes, right.
How?"
It's true. And
They be
then
like, "Shut up."
but when you couple that with looking at someone on Instagram that is where you would like to be,
Right.
then you start becoming anxious and
Yeah.
have increased negative self-talk, that you stop yourself from doing something so great because you may not even be doing it the way they're actually doing it. You might have a whole different path, but you're not even taking the step to do that, to even see where it's going to take you, because you're so afraid of where you are now and whether you have the, enough time, or if it's too late
Mhm.
for you.
You get
And so
paralyzed in your state.
you do. And
So then how do we I wanna get into how do we overcome imposter syndrome?
so, speaking from a place of, wanting to be an expert on something, I think it's important to collect and identify all the accomplishments that you've done, right? When, just kind of giving the example of a job that you're trying to go for, a
Right?
position that you're trying to go for, and you feel, "Oh, I don't have all of the qualifications," right? But if you really sit down and list out all the things that you do, you'll start to amaze yourself, because you'll
Right.
realize, I'm a bad bitch.
Hello, hello.
I went through an exercise. I remember this one lady was just talking about, when, especially like when we're looking for another, looking either to move up in our company, or m- looking for a position that's,
Mhm.
you know for a higher pay. We tend to kind of look at things laterally instead of taking that step up, because we feel like, "Oh, we just don't qualify." Yeah, you qualify because you're doing all of this stuff. And if one thing I would say in that situation is keeping a journal of your accomplishments,
Right.
writing down all the things that you are doing, all the small and large projects, because at the end of the year, when you're sitting with your supervisor, you can kind of list
It'll be
all
easy.
of the shit that you've done, and you can ask for that high, that raise, or you can go find another job that that you are qualified for. So I think seeing when you write it down and you see
Right.
it, you
You
start
can see the
to.
magnitude of it, the
Right, you'll
impact of what
right.
all that you've done.
Exactly, exactly. You'll see what you've
I think
done.
that's great.
Yeah, I think that's just one thing that you can do to
I mean, I'm
overcome that.
gonna say I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off
No,
that
no,
way.
go ahead.
No, I'm gonna say that it starts with what I learned growing up from G.I. Joe. Knowing is half the battle. Acknowledge it.
Yes.
Acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Knowing is half the battle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once because sometimes you don't even know, like, there are instances in my career when I look back and I think to myself, "Oh, wow, I that was because I didn't think I was able to do it or that I was qualified to do that."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, I think once you've acknowledged it, then it's pausing and reevaluating and kind of getting introspective, giving yourself space to unravel. Well, why do you feel inadequate in that space, in that
Mhm.
particular situation,
Mhm.
scenario, whatever that is? And so I feel like that's a way to identify that and get ahead of it. And then obviously in the space of boosting your self-confidence, yes, is reminding yourself that it's not your business to know what others think of you. It is not your
Mhm.
business.
It's not. It's
Once you
not.
release that, then it doesn't matter what people think about you any longer. So release it, people. Remind yourself that it is not your business what other people think of you.
And no one's perfect. Like really, the people
No one.
whatever they thinking of, whatever they think about you, it really doesn't matter because who the fuck are they?
Exactly, exactly. And and let me tell you, you talked about performance review, and I'm gonna say that I'm so grateful that I don't have to do performance reviews anymore because I always wanted to blow my brains out.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
at the end of the day, though, what performance reviews have taught me was to be less humble. Y'all need to
Mhm.
be less humble. Tout your achievements. That's
Yes.
your rallying cry. Like,
Yes.
hype yourself up.
Because no one else will.
No one.
I know I've had performance appraisals where I'm telling them, yeah, that I did this, and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot you did that.
Right.
Yes.
You're like, I know I'm a bad bitch. Yeah, I
Yes,
know.
you remember?
I did that. I did
That
that.
was me. That was me.
Right. You like King Kong ain't got nothing on me. Don't play with me. No, no, but this is good. I think, this is a really good starting point for people to get into this habit of being introspective. Identify when it is that you're feeling that you are some sort of fraud or some sort of imposter, and then be proactive in trying to address that because
And
it's a
talk to
hindrance.
yeah, and talk to yourself,
Yep,
when you have those negative thoughts that creep up whenever you want to take a step forward,
yep.
replace that with a positive one and say that out loud. Say it out loud so that you can hear. Not only are you thinking it, but you're saying
Hmm.
it and you're feeling those
Right.
words run through you, right?
Yep.
Because that you want to just negate all of those negative thoughts because you don't want to get stuck in one place. You want to move forward. You want to keep going. And if you're trying to, reach a certain goal, we've said this before, you don't have to have everything figured out in the beginning. Just taking that step. Come up with a list of tasks that you need to do and
And
celebrate
just
those
do one of
small
those, and
right,
just do
and
one of those tasks.
celebrate
Don't
those
even.
small successes.
Yep.
Every little task you've completed, that is a success, and you should
Najee and I,
celebrate
we have
it.
our little project plan, and when I hit complete and that little drop down for our spreadsheet, I am like, yes, we completed that
Mhm.
stuff. Today, Najee, I went through our project plan, and I was just like, oh my goodness, I want to thank me for believing in me for doing this.
Okay,
I want to thank my
okay.
sister for completing that task. Okay, but seriously, guys, we hope that this conversation has really helped open your eyes or at least drop a gem or anything that could, resonate with you and make you see things differently and approach uh, this feeling of not being good enough, because you are. Because in the stat that I found, you had a 1 in 400 trillion of a chance to have been born. A 1 in 400 trillion
That means you're
of a chance
special.
to have been born. So you need to take that stat and feel good about the fact that you're on this earth. So never feel like you're not enough, because you are, and do what it is that you're meant out here to do. There's a lot of noise out there, but our message is consistent. Stop getting distracted by the smoke and mirrors, tune out the noise, and focus on your purpose in life. That's what brings you joy in life. So focus on that and vibrate higher. And always, thank you for listening.